Welcome, beautiful creatures, to the Lightness of Being Podcast, where we celebrate the dance of life and explore ways to find joy, laughter, and lightness, even when faced with challenges. Join me, your host, Monika Stefanik, as we step into the light and discover a realm of potential and possibilities for greater ease in our lives. Let's laugh, learn, and grow together. Welcome, beautiful beings, to this lovely episode of the Lightness of Being Podcast. I have my amazing friend, an intuitive and healer and therapist, and just magical, incredible woman and being on this planet that I'm constantly inspired by and has been such a gift to me on this journey on this planet, Shanti O'Connor.
Thank you, Monika. Can you walk with me to everywhere I go in the world and just like introduce me to everyone just like that?
Yes, absolutely.
You're my spokesperson. Hello, everybody. This is an amazing woman. I want you to meet.
Just this sweet softness of this magical, incredible creature. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I was thinking today on the way over here, because the last time we really got to chat was on your radio show, your podcast, which I know you're not doing anymore, the Curiosity Lab. But yeah, that was a really special conversation. Oh my gosh. Like 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. So before we get into what we're going to talk about today, what's something that you're celebrating in your life right now?
I'm celebrating my age, my aging self, and really celebrating all of the changes that are coming with age, with a lot of appreciation for my body and where it's taken me and how healthy it is. And I'm celebrating the beauty of this aging body and really feeling grateful that I'm not stuck in the paradigm of, because I'm a woman, I'm not enough. So, it's up for me a lot because, I'm a middle-aged woman. I'm in perimenopause. I'm changing. Yeah. A lot is changing, and I appreciate the changes. Actually, there's some challenges with it, but in general, I'm ready. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
You are beautiful and radiant, and you wouldn't even know.
Thank you.
But yeah, I know it's a lot. There's been a lot of women that have been sharing that. My clients, just those changes and how challenging it can be, but trying to find some ease and grace. And I love how you're approaching it, just that space of like, yeah, this is a part of the process, and how do we lean into it and just find the grace and honoring of that process of getting to be a woman.
Yeah, I feel like in many ways I'm becoming more me than I was when I was a sexy little thing 20 years ago. So to me, it just feels like more of a becoming, and it feels powerful. So I don't feel because I'm not as sexy, beautiful as I was, that I'm less of an amazing person because of that. So I feel the opposite, actually. Yeah.
You're radiating the opposite of it. Yes. With age comes wisdom and beauty and all the things, just in a totally different light. And yeah, even as I'm getting older, I mean, I'm like just freshly in my 30s, but I'm feeling it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm really glad we're like leaving some of that other stuff behind. Yeah, it's like it was a lot.
Now I get to be a sexy MILF.
Yes.
The older woman that the younger men are like, man, she's hot. She's a little old for me, but she's hot.
She's hot. I like that.
I
yeah.
handle that. I actually get hit on by a lot of young guys.
Do you really?
Yeah, because I think it's like a thing. It's like younger men like see older women. It's a thing. I didn't realize it's a thing, but it's a thing, ladies. So wait until you're, in your mid-40s. You're going to have a lot of men, more than you would realize.
Interesting, especially during that period of time where it's like your body is undergoing these changes that like no one can really see externally, and you're just like, I don't feel sexy, but then you have these people coming up to you like, hey, and you're like, yeah, hey, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's weird. It's weird, but I'm like, to each one of them, I'm like, thank you. And I'm also kind of getting in a space too where I feel like as women, I notice this, like, we don't compliment men, right? Like, as women, we constantly get acknowledged about our looks and our beauty, our whatever we're presenting to the world that's being noticed, right? But I don't think men receive that. They don't get that in the same way. And so I've also been thinking too, and this might be part of why some of these younger guys are like, hey, because I'm like acknowledging them. Like, you're cute.
Yeah.
You know, like I mean, and not in a like I want to hook up sexual way, but just an appreciation of like, wow, you have this really cool thing happening, or look at that hairstyle, or whatever. Just like seeing them and acknowledging them.
And like, hey, you look good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, maybe that's part of it, but
I like that.
we're digressing because I know.
That's okay. Well, I feel so grateful to be sitting here with you because we're in our beautiful office space that we share together, and we do incredible healing work in all sorts of ways and just get to help a lot of people. And it's a real blessing.
It's a beautiful space. I love it.
It is a beautiful space with lots of plants that I finally just watered today because they were a little upset. But it's okay. And we got a lot of crystals holding it down. And you got a big obsidian in the corner and a beautiful big rose quartz behind us. And then all these magical ones are here too. So they're helping and holding us today as we dive into the topic of grief. Yeah. Which I was so excited to have this conversation with you just because of everything that's going on in the world right now. And things that are going on in my personal life, and just it's just so alive. Like, there is personal and collective grief that is permeating like every cell of existence, and this feels just like a really important conversation to have. So
it's funny because as I was driving over here today, I was thinking about how interesting today is, right? Because today is the inauguration of Trump, right? And it's also MLK Day. And I was sitting with sort of the work that, thinking about sitting with MLK and the work that he did in this world, and his legacy and how it continues to live in us and inform us and give us strength in many different ways. And here, I don't really want to talk politics at all, but, Donald Trump is a lot of things. And, today he signed an order pretty much saying there's only two genders. And, which means which is going to have a lot of meaning to that. And in many ways, here we had this man, MLK, Martin Luther King Jr., who was about equality and justice and, finding a way so we can all learn how to exist together without hate, without, everything that was happening. And then, we just brought in a leader who, one of his first orders was to, pretty much erase a lot of the queer community. So, I don't know. I am. It's funny. We're talking about grief, and I was feeling some sadness around that. Some sadness around, like, I have a lot of people I work with, a lot of clients and friends who are navigating what it means to not feel like their gender and not really understanding how to, like, land in the world. Like, I'm not binary? Am I trans masc? Am I trans femme? And so it's an issue that I get to sit with often, and I get to sit with the complexity of what that means for my clients and friends and helping them navigate it. And, you know, in just one day, you know, that a lot of that has changed. So anyways, I was feeling some sadness sitting on that coming here today. So, but we can talk about grief in a different way, because I have a lot to say about grief.
I know you do, which is why I love getting to talk to you about this topic. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that is what's really alive in your world and in the world in general right now. Yeah. So it's really important to speak to all aspects. I really appreciate you bringing that through. Yeah. It's a big day. I mean, like, of course that's in my awareness, but it didn't even really I was like, oh yeah, part of me is just like, there's so much right now going on. I'm just like, okay, so it's like holding it all. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, when it comes to grief work, I mean, there's a house here that is called the Grief House, right? Or is that?
It's had many different incarnations and many different names, but there's actually a few nonprofits in Bend that deal specifically with grief. One that deals with, when you've lost a child, and the one that you're talking about, I don't know its current incarnation, what it's called. I'm sorry, it's been a little bit since I've dropped in. Yeah. But that's Marcy Wayman's you're talking about. Yeah. So she does more just grief in general and groups and, helps people with whatever's alive in them around grief. Okay. It's amazing, yeah.
It is amazing. Yeah, I'd love to hear you speak to just some of that work that you've done over the years, because I know there was this grief well that you built, I think, out on land here. And then there is also this other really amazing event that's coming up, right, in a few months, this big grief event, which, I'd love to talk about that too. But yeah, just your experience over the years and what that has looked like.
So I had an amazing, profound teacher around grief. And her name is Sobonfu Some. She's no longer alive, but she is a woman who grew up in Africa, in the Dagara tribe in Burkina Faso. And her community, they constantly participate in ritual and ceremony, specifically around grief and joy, or grief and abundance. And so whenever someone in the tribe is really struggling or there's like conflict happening, they as a whole tribe are like, it's time that we do a grief ceremony. And so she grew up in a community, in a tribal situation where grief was constantly on the table. It was talked about, it was shared, it was understood, it was supported, and the whole community would come together to help one or two people move, which, they recognized your grief is my grief, it's our grief, it's you were not separate from us. As she grew up, her tribe decided that she is meant to come to America. And so she didn't want this. She wanted to stay with her family and community, but they felt like she was the one that was supposed to come to America and teach us about grief from her lineage. And so when she was alive, she lived in the Bay Area, and she would travel and perform these grief ceremonies. And she would do 2 a year at Brighton Bush.
Wow.
For many, many years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I had the opportunity of going to Brighton Bush and participating in a grief ceremony. And it was terrifying.
Yeah.
And I didn't even, I've always been someone who understood grief and I knew how it lived in my body and knew how to be with it, but I never felt safe to share my grief. I never knew how to allow myself to be seen in my grief. And so going to this ceremony with like 50, 60 other people that I did not know was terrifying. And so I learned a lot. I learned a lot about vulnerability. I learned a lot about showing up. I learned a lot about the power of allowing my grief to be seen and to be felt and to be held. And I learned how to do that for somebody else. Many other people, and all of them strangers. And it literally, it was a moment that changed. Like, that experience changed my life. And it really set me on the trajectory in some ways that I'm on today. Shortly before Sobonfu died, she gave Hillary Hurst, who's a dear friend of mine.
Loved Hillary.
Yeah. She gave Hillary permission to take the ceremony as it is, as she's been taught. Because Hillary trained with Sobonfu more than me. Okay. So Hillary kind of is more of the keeper of that than me.
Wow.
And so me, Barbara Largent, and Hillary Hurst, we decided in 2018 or something to, it was time. Like, we could feel it was time that the community was ready for this. And so we, in 2019, 2020, somewhere around there, we had our first grief ceremony that we held.
Wow.
And we held it to the exact lineage that we were, all three of us learned from Sobonfu. And so that ceremony happened right before COVID.
I was about to say, I was like, that was perfect timing for that. Yep.
It was.
Divinely timed.
It was. I think everyone that was there for that ceremony, I think it helped them to navigate COVID in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we decided to take a break for, I think, a year, and then we've been hosting it since, and we have one coming up March 5th. But yeah, so then the other part of that is you're asking about a grief well.
Yeah.
So my partner Christopher is wonderful with rock, and he offered to build us a well, because part of the ceremony is we make these bundles, and the bundles go on the grief altar, and we have a full day, 12 hours of grieving, and then the next day of grieving. Okay. And while we're grieving, this grief altar is holding, containing, absorbing the energy.
Wow.
And then we take the bundles, which the grief bundles are on the altar, and then we release those into the earth. It's like a cleansing, right? And so Christopher, who's also studied under Sobonfu, he knows what this is.
Really? Did you know that when you guys got together? Side note.
I found out shortly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just like, how beautiful.
Yeah.
How beautiful is that? Wow.
It's powerful. So for him to offer to build us this well so that we have a place to dump these bundles, so we can, and it's beautiful. It's on the Unity property. And so if you get a chance, you can go there, and it's free, and you can sit at the well, and you can, just sit with your grief and release the grief. So yeah, so it's up there. It's used for the ceremony, but it's up year round. Anyone can go there. And it's beautiful. It's such a gift to have.
Wow.
Yeah. I feel like I said a lot.
That was a lot. No, I'm just enthralled by all of that. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the part that stuck with me most was kind of what you said at the beginning of not knowing how to let your grief be held and seen, because so much of what we do experience is whatever the hard or challenging times that we're going through, it's like, I have to go through this alone, and I have to deal with this alone. And so what a lot of people end up doing is thank you, Henry. He's like, yes, you don't have to be sad. So much joy. We just stuff it down. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a product not only of our culture and society, which is, really values strength and hard work and independence.
That masculine essence. Yeah.
I also think it's a product of trauma. I think, what happens in trauma is it's not the event that's traumatizing, right? We all can experience an event and have a different reaction to it, right? What trauma is is when you have an overwhelming experience that doesn't have a relational home. It doesn't have a place. The energy of that experience doesn't have a home to land. It doesn't have a person that's available to help you process, understand, feel that experience, right? So trauma is a very isolating experience.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you had someone there that's like, attending to you, are you okay? What do you need? How can I help you? I see that you're X, Y, or Z. Like if you have someone attending to you, you're going to be able to move through the experience, almost any experience, honestly.
Yeah.
But because you're experiencing an event that you have to like deal with on your own, I think that sets the stage for then not feeling safe to like go to somebody or have someone support you when you're having a hard time, right? Because what happens, it's so funny, like I have so many clients that are like, yeah, I had the best parents in the world, but like I have the hardest, I can't have this like healthy, loving relationship. I don't understand why my partner X, Y, and Z. And I feel like it's because even when we have amazing parents, we have all of these little moments in our childhood where we were not seen, not understood, not held, not loved in a way that made us feel seen, in a way that made us feel like we belong, in a way that made us feel safe. And so those slowly just start building up to create an experience of something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Unconsciously. This is an unconscious belief, right? Something's wrong with me. I'm not good enough. Like that. You start building that shame. And so, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the reason why I wasn't able to allow myself to feel grief in the presence of other, to experience grief in the presence of other, is because I had so much trauma, and trauma specifically in a relational sense.
Yeah.
Like people weren't safe for me because for me, if I'm going to feel something intensely, that means that person's going to leave. That person is going to either shame me, attack me, or leave. None of that is safe. All of that feels terrifying. And so I had a life of feeling emotions quietly in a room by myself.
Yeah.
And not knowing how to share that. And so this was, and I've done therapy, and I did therapy before, but therapy, even though I am a therapist, like you can hide.
Oh, 100%.
In a therapy room.
Absolutely.
Right?
It's nice to like have someone to talk to, but I mean, yeah, I did therapy for like 10 years on and off, mostly pretty consistently. And yeah, you're still hiding from yourself. Yeah.
And you're just sharing stories.
Yeah.
And you can like make the story sound however you want it to sound.
Mm-hmm.
A skilled therapist is going to challenge you. A skilled therapist is going to see that. A skilled therapist is going to be, we're not doing that, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't have a therapist like that. And so I learned how to like hide how I felt. But when I went into the room with Sobonfu and these 50 other people, and these people who, Sobonfu, which is happening to us here in Bend, Sobonfu would have the same people showing up year after year to do these ceremonies with her. And, we're seeing that now, like where we have the same people, not the same, but a lot of the same people showing up. And so when you go into a ceremony with people who have done this before, they're not going to let you hide.
I was like, you cannot hide. You cannot, which is what a special gift to be in that space, but so confronting. It's like, no, this space is for you. Like, you can be seen super vulnerable, and it takes a lot of courage to be in that space.
It was the first time I allowed someone to hold me while I cried. And to allow like a stranger, like someone, I don't even know their name. I can't even tell you their name now. I don't even know if I would be able to recognize them if I saw them, but I felt like safe to be held, like physically held while I released my grief. And that was like, wow, like someone will do that for me. Like someone cares enough about me to do that. And I think that's when you're in community, when you are in community, you are in service to each other.
Yeah.
You know, we're here. I'm here not only for myself, I'm here for you, because when you, Monika, are thriving and doing well, you're going to show up in my world in a healthy way. It's just this positive feedback loop that we just keep getting better and better. And so, yeah, it was beautiful.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been... I can relate a lot to some of the things that you shared when it comes to, growing up in a home. I think it was a little bit different, but also just like dealing with a lot of just the emotions on my own, like going home in my room and just dealing with it, because emotionally it wasn't safe. It was all about like my parents' feelings, and like I had to like show up for them, but then it was never about like me. So then I would have these big outbursts when I was a child, but like it also wasn't even safe to do that. You know, I got shamed and blamed and all of that. So I resonate really deeply. And like as that's translated into adulthood, it has been challenging to like let others see me cry and even allow that to be okay. And like maybe it's not in a grief ceremony, but even just in general. And that's only something over the last like I think year or two, that because of just like the immense like transitions I've undergone, it's kind of forced me into that space where like the tears would just come and I wouldn't even have the ability to hold it in. Like it would have to come out, and then I would notice if I kept it in that it would just like, it would choke me up in so many different ways, and I would have so much more pain in my body and all this stuff if it wasn't coming up and through. And it's been such an interesting process with grief of like finding the spaces where like learning how to hold myself, but also learning when to ask for help and when those spaces are really required, because I don't necessarily always want to come into people's worlds with just like, oh, here's my stuff. Like I realized that there was a point where I was doing some of that to be like, help, like I need you to help me through the pain. Like without another, I can't get through this pain and through this experience. And so it's like, I know that we do need each other, but then I also saw this kind of like more like toxic space of like, I'm relying on someone else to make me feel better, which was really hard because like, I didn't get held or loved or cuddled enough when I was a child either. So it's like, but I also do need this. So it's such like a weird line to toe, but then like finding the empowerment of when I do show up for myself. And I've had these amazing experiences that the universe has just come down. Like I have so many people in my realm that I can reach out to and like go to in person or talk to on the phone. And I do that so much more now, reaching out and asking for help. But like, there's been times where I've done that and, you know, no one answers. And it's not because they're not there. It's just because there's like this interesting, circumstances. And so the universe puts me in the spaces of like, no, you're alone. And I like, when like, oh, I'm alone. And like, I could go into the...
Well, that's the story.
Yeah, the story. Yes, exactly. That's the wound. And so it's like and I've definitely gone deep into that wound. But like in this recent grief space that I've been undergoing, I've found that space, but then I've leaned into the edge of that and found a way to nurture and hold myself and then alchemize that grief that's coming up and through. But then on the other side of it, also like realizing like, oh, even if I'm feeling good in this moment, I'm still going to reach out to my friends for support. I'm still going to go and hang out with the amazing medicine woman and process through like what is real and alive in here, because we do still need support, but not giving my power away to someone else to make me feel better. But that's been such a difficult line.
It's a learning process of refinement, right? Like it is because we historically, and I'm going to generalize, this might not be your story or people who are listening, but we tend to be raised by adults who are not emotionally mature yet, right? There's a lot of emotional immaturity, and some of it's really not even their fault, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot for generations, all of our ancestors have been dealing with. There's been a lot of trauma, a lot of pain. So anyways, and it's been passed on. It gets passed on. We know this with epigenetics. We know that like you adopt the nervous system of your mother. And that all of her trauma, all of her emotional, everything that she's experienced, she hands to you as when you're born. And so this emotional immaturity of not really having parents who even understand their own self. They don't understand how they really feel. And so they tend to be in this reactive stage. You know, a lot of parents react to their children's outbursts with anger and with violence. Which is the opposite. Like a child who's like having an outburst, they're saying, I'm scared. I need love, right? Like, and instead, like, they get the opposite of, you're this bad kid, go to your room, or, whatever. And so I think we have to, like, we're at a point in our life, in the world, in history, where we have to mature emotionally.
Yeah. Which means reparenting ourselves.
It means reparenting, yes. But there is a fine line of, like, what does that mean, holding that for myself? And how much of that do I allow to be held by another? And I think some of this comes with, like, emotional consent. I think, you're talking about how sometimes, for a while you would just go and just, like, sort of, like, overshare or share without, and
emotional dumping, as some people would call it. Yeah. But you're also just like, I'm feeling a lot of things and I don't know how to regulate it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that can be tricky, right? Yeah. Because depending on who you're doing with, it can re-wound you. It can re-traumatize you, depending on how they hold it or not.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to ask for consent. Like, hey, I'm having a really rough day. Are you okay if I share this? Or, and realizing we all have different capacities of what we can hold for ourselves and another. Like sometimes I feel so overwhelmed in my body, I cannot take in other information outside of myself, right? And I have to do a lot of self-care. So, you're talking about that. Like,
absolutely.
So that's a moment of, like, I have to really be gentle and do some things so that I can, like, feel better and, like, get calm again and come back online. And, and when I feel like, so it takes for me a level of discernment of when I feel like this is a wounding that happened in connection to another, in a relational space. So it needs to be seen by another so I can start to, like, heal that wound. And so to me, that's been the discernment of, like, just because grief is up for me, just because I'm sad or angry, doesn't mean I need other people to see it or hold it for me. But there are certain things, and I want to think of an exact example that is just not coming right now.
That's okay. Give it some space. I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah, but I feel like there are moments where, like, okay, for instance, I sort of grew up in a home with a mom that was mentally not well and emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, right? And so if I was feeling angry, that for her would mean she didn't want me to be angry because that was overwhelming for her.
Yes.
Like, my feeling of anger was so scary and overwhelming for her that she needed to stop immediately. And so her would be, like, to use violence. Like, your anger means I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Your anger means I'm going to, shame you and put you down because I want you to stop.
Because she couldn't hold it. She couldn't hold it.
So now when anger's coming up for me in the presence of another, my work is, how do I feel this and not attack? But how do I feel this and be okay with this and share my boundary? Because usually for me, anger comes up when I feel like I'm being attacked or a boundary's been violated.
Same.
Right?
Yeah.
And so being able to, like, go to that person and say, I am not okay with this. I need this to stop. That's a moment of showing my emotions
Mm-hmm.
and allowing it to be repaired
From like a grounded
from a
space,
grounded
not
space,
a
because
reactive space.
I'm more grounded,
Yes.
right? I'm
Yeah.
more like, this is not okay.
Yeah. But it takes
And
so much practice to get to that spot.
it takes a lot of self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean, and only through like those reactive spaces and actually being willing to look at those patterns, which usually other people will like mirror back to us and be like, well, you acted like this. And it's like, well, no, I didn't, right? We fight it a lot sometimes because we don't want to actually acknowledge that we've caused pain or that we reacted in a certain way or that we've done certain actions that are very out of character, but it doesn't mean that that defines who we are. It's coming from a traumatized state, and only by actually, which is what I've learned this year, is only by actually being willing to look at it can we begin to even remotely change it. And it's like, it's really hard to look at those pieces.
Yeah, and something I've learned is if I'm reacting strongly to something, usually, like if someone's bringing something to me that I'm reacting strongly around, it's usually because there's some hard truth in there that I'm not fully ready to hear. But I think it's okay if we're messy. So I don't want to make it sound like we have to be polished and perfect. I actually think being messy and learning in the moment is okay.
It's part of the process.
What I think the learning has to be around is, how do I make appropriate repair?
Yes.
Repair is the most important thing. If you get anything from this podcast, I want you to get this around repair. Repair is the most important relational tool that you can learn, because it's going to another person and acknowledging and saying, I'm sorry, I X, Y, and Z. It's acknowledging that you weren't your best self. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. You don't have to be your best self. But by acknowledging, I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I said some. I'm not sorry about the content. I think the content
was real.
The content was right.
Yeah.
But how I communicated, how it came across, how I treated you because of it, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, there's not enough repair that happens in this world.
There's not.
And when someone comes to you with authentic repair, that's someone you can trust, right? You can trust repair. But if someone does something and they just project it onto you, you're bad, you're wrong, it was you can't trust that, right? Because that's someone who doesn't have a whole lot of self-awareness. Yeah. And they're not willing to like be humble and do repair. Yeah. And so I think it's okay. I think it's okay. You know, you're talking about learning this refinement process of like how I'm sort of learning, like, what do I share? What do I don't share? What do I hold? What do I don't hold? And I think it's okay to be messy with all that, because in the messiness, you're refining what feels good, what feels right. And then when you're messy and it doesn't feel good, that's okay. You just like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do better next time. Like that self-accountability piece. Like, I'm in a fucking relationship right now where I am learning so much self-accountability, and it's powerful.
It is. It's a little brutal sometimes, but with that repair being a huge piece of it, it's like I'm only just now learning that. I think this year is like the first time I ever even heard the word repair and rupture within relationship, because like the relationship I have been in just had so much of that. And previously I was with someone where like we didn't really argue, and it's like everything was fine, but there wasn't as much emotional depth. And so it's like, but it's through those things coming up and through that we actually do get to see those parts of ourselves that we do have to bring some self-awareness to. And I'm only just now seeing this and learning this and recognizing how important and crucial repair is. And that the mess gets to be a piece of it. Like, we are messy humans. We're not perfect. And it doesn't matter how much evolution we undergo. Like, you're always going to have to do repair, but as long as it's present, as long as it's there, as long as that like humility and that ability to take responsibility for your actions is there. So I guess my question is, how do you approach something where it's like, if one person is coming into, whether it's a romantic relationship, friendship, parents, how do you approach if like one person is coming into that place of repair and the other one doesn't really seem to be meeting you there?
Yeah. So repair work is for you. Okay.
Okay.
It's not for the other person.
Okay.
So when you create a rupture, when you do something that you know is not in your best and highest intention, you recognize that. You going to the other person and owning it, acknowledging it, and apologizing for it is a healing moment for you, because it's a moment of forgiveness for you. Because usually when we do these things, there's an inner critic, there's shame, there's a whole process that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're someone that doesn't want to do that. That, like, most of us don't want to. No one wants to be a bitch.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be a bitch.
Yeah.
But we all sometimes are a bitch. And so if the other person, if you're going to that person and you're like, hey, this is where I'm at, you say your piece, you genuinely acknowledge it, right? And there's not an acknowledgement, or there's what's happening? Like I don't care, leave me alone.
Yeah, that, or like just continuing to kind of like rub salt in the wound, maybe like not fully receiving the repair that's coming through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where your own self-love, self-care comes in, right? So when you're coming genuinely like that, and they're either not acknowledging it or continuing to this is where you get to set a boundary of like,
this is not okay.
I care about you.
Yeah.
I really, really want to be in a connection with you. I want us to be able to move on. It seems like there's something that needs to be said on your end. There's something you're feeling that you need to let me know so that I can hear it. I really want to hear that, but this is not okay. Like, I am not okay with this. And when you're ready, when you feel like you're ready to have a conversation, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. So yeah, set that boundary, but set the boundary with love. Like, I love you, I care about you, I want to be with you, I want to be connected to you, and this is not okay.
Yeah.
And when you feel like you're ready to like talk about this, I want to hear. I had a situation where I said something in the community in a group that I was facilitating that was kind of twisted a little bit, and it got back to this person. It wasn't about this person, but it was about she was involved. Anyways, she got really upset about it.
Okay.
And I immediately went to her and was like, yeah, this is what I said. This is what I did. This is why I did it. And I want to hear how this impacted you. I want to know what this did for you. And she told me all of this information about what it did, but she could not forgive me. And I realized in that I didn't need her to forgive me, right? Like, I know what I did. I owned it, and I came to her with openness and compassion and love and willingness to do whatever, and we still, like, we're friendly, we're cordial, but of course, we never had the repair that I was ready for. She wasn't ready for it. But that door is open. If she ever wants to come and step through that door and have a conversation about it, I'm here. I'm ready for it,
resonate so deeply with that, with a situation in my life right now too. And really, it has come down to that space of like
how much I know I've been showing up in true love and care for myself, of like, it doesn't matter how the other person receives this, perceives this, responds, doesn't respond. Like, I love myself. I know how I went into this situation. I know how I approach this, and like, it's okay. It's fine. And I'm just going to move on and live my life. And like, I'm not closing the door, but like, I'm just going to keep moving forward. Whereas in the past, I would have like obsessed over it, or like I needed that, like that closure, that validation or whatever from the other person for it to be okay for me to let it go and move on. Yeah. Right. So then it's about me. Yeah. And so something that I'm also learning is, just back to what you said about if the repair is there, you can trust, right? Like you can trust that person. And so it's like, if there isn't any of that repair, if you don't see whoever it is that you want to be in connection with, like leaning into that space, like that also comes from self-love of like cutting a boundary, right? Or just setting a boundary of like, I don't know if this is right for me. Like maybe we just need to revisit this friendship or whatever it is, just because like if you just see them constantly coming at you and not actually taking responsibility for their actions, like that's been really hard for me because of how I grew up and because I don't have a great relationship with my family. Like my friends are some of the most important people in my life. And so when I find that present in relationships, I'm just like, this is so hard because I just want us to get along. I want everything to be okay. I want to fix it. The fixer is part of my Gene Key profile too. And so it's like, but it's been really detrimental to me because I've self-abandoned in that process of trying to fix something that the other person is just not ready for, and I've been pushy about it and all these things, and it just breaks my heart because I'm like, I just want everything to be okay.
We have to trust another person's process, right? And sometimes it's not even a not ready for it, it's also like not really capable. Yeah. Right? Like they just don't have the awareness and resources for what you're ready for. And I think it has to be okay because we are so complex. Yeah. And we really don't fully understand what another person's holding and navigating, and we don't really understand our impact, right? And I can come to you meaning so much love and goodness, but like say something that you're not ready to hear and it can trigger you or activate you in a way that I was not intending, right? Yeah. And so at some point it's kind of like this is not about you. And you know, if you're coming with grace and compassion and kindness, that's the best you can do. I think you can like settle into like, I love you. I feel like I am showing up the best I can, and I am here when you're ready. Yeah. Right? And just trusting that you coming with this higher emotional, intelligent way, that's going to have a humongous impact on them. And that you're giving them an opportunity to level up. Okay? Compassion is a level up. Like your whole system, when you are in the presence of someone offering you compassion, your whole system will move energetically up to a whole different awareness. Absolutely. And so just holding that like open compassion of, and obviously if it's like way more toxic, don't do that, but it doesn't sound like you're talking about navigating that. It's just like sticky situations where people are having a hard time communicating and acknowledging and moving on. Yeah. And that to me sounds like someone or people that are in their trauma. They're in their pattern. And
which I have so much compassion for because I've been there. I'm there a lot of the, like I'm still working through my own. So we're exactly.
It's hard to see it. It's hard to understand it.
Oh, that piece of like compassion being that level up that you spoke to, like this last week is the first time in my life that I have actually fully experienced it. And just going through a really challenging situation and using a lot of tools in my toolkit and but like constantly, even when I'm upset, even when I'm in pain, coming back to the, and like realizing the vibrational frequency that that's giving out, like even if it's not verbally or over, text message to another person, just energetically, like I can feel it emanating out into the world, and I'm just like, this doesn't, and how it feels in my body, and I'm like, this does not feel good. And then like every other message that I'm receiving is like, it's all love, like just come back to love, come back into compassion, and like emanate out from that space. And it's like, you can still feel what you're feeling, but finding a way to come back into compassionate space with that. I was reading Pema Chodron's book, When Things Fall Apart. And I think the second chapter is actually titled When Things Fall Apart. And the last line of that book is like something along the lines of, are you making peace or are you making war? And just like that active
Think about
choice.
that as in self. Are you making
Yes.
peace
Here.
in self, or are you making war in
Yes.
self?
Yeah, because if that's where we're at here, then that's what's going to emanate out. And I realize, like, even though I have these big feelings and these experiences, it's like, yes, I'm justified in all of that. And also, like, what do I want to emanate out into the world? How do I want to move through my day with this, like, resentment and anger and all of that? Or do I want to move through with, like, not throwing it to the side, but holding it so softly and so sweetly and so gently, and allowing it to be present, but bringing that love and that sweetness and that tenderness and that compassion into that space, and then communicating and emanating out into the world from that space. So like, even when I do go to talk to my friends, it's coming from that space. It's like, yes, these other things are present, and also like, this is the way that I'm speaking about it. Yeah.
So Jonathan Goldman, who I studied under, he's a shaman that lives in Southern Oregon, and he does like ayahuasca journeys. And I studied under him for a couple of years. And he talks a lot about compassion is a force. It's a force of energy that's available to anybody. And that we can ask for compassion. We can call on this living energetic to be present with us, to help us, to like, we can ask compassion to go like, hey, space of compassion. I mean, I'm just sort of like making up. It doesn't have to be this way. So it could be in any way, but like, please, I want to send compassion to Monika right now. Please envelop her, with compassion. And he talks about energetically, right here is where compassion lives in your body. And so even like, just like holding that energy, holding that intention, sending compassion, feeling compassion, asking compassion, please come inside my body. Please let me feel compassion. Like, just being in that state of surrender and ask is quite profound.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, compassion, I feel like we talk a lot about, like, empathy, and empathy is important and beautiful, but empathy is a little sticky, I think. There's a piece of relating to another, like, I understand that pain because I felt that pain, right? It's more on this human to human level. And I feel like compassion is the next step after empathy. Like, empathy is a great practice to have. I think we all need empathy. We could have more empathy. But then the next step would be like, how do I just hold this space of compassion, knowing that who you are, what you're doing is right and perfect and beautiful for you, and that you are a whole being. You are whole. That person is whole. Whatever is happening in the world is for their own best, greatest good in that, right? And so having this like higher love come in, and just being in surrender and accepting it all. And so it's a practice though.
It is. But like, when we do lean into that, like that place of that practice of surrender and letting go and just letting that be present, it just feels so much better. It feels so much better than being in a space of Yeah. Not compassion.
So I want to circle back to grief. So this is making me want to come back to grief.
Yeah.
And I think grief is one of the most healing emotions that we can allow ourselves to feel. And I think grief is something that in our culture we narrowly define as when we lose a pet, a loved one. That's when we can grieve, right? Like that's grief.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we can look at grief as like when there's a breakup, we can allow ourselves to feel grief. But grief is actually everywhere. It touches everything. It's not necessarily just those moments. Grief is love. Like you cannot feel and experience grief if you don't know love, if you haven't experienced love. And so if we take this like bigger, elevated look at grief is actually an emotion that can be felt when we have a dream that we never got to
actualize.
Yeah. When we have, a relationship to the natural world and we see a tree getting cut down, or we see the disrespect of nature, like there's natural grief, right? There's also the grief of like watching somebody else getting hurt. Yeah. There's the grief of getting hurt. There's grief. There's so many different types of grief. There's more that I'm not acknowledging, but I think the power of grief is this invitation to be in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's an invitation to feel the love that is leaving you. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it actually leaves.
I don't think it leaves, but it is all consuming. Like it really does bring you like deeply into that present moment to be with it. Yes. And it's so beautiful. And I do remember like reading or listening to something recently said that like the amount of grief that you experience is like, related to the amount of love that you felt for a person, a situation, like whatever that is. And so it's beautiful. It's beautiful because the amount of grief that's coming in is the extent of the amount of love that you had for that tree or that partnership or that parent or that healthy body.
That's no longer healthy.
Yeah.
And, in the ceremony, we teach people how do you really be present with your grief? How do you feel your grief? How do you allow your grief a voice? What is the voice of your grief? Like for some people, grief has to come out through yelling. It has to come out through anger. It has to come out through like moving. Like grief has its own lived wisdom to it. And the only way that you can deal with grief is to go through it, to like really feel it and allow it to be. And for some of us, that can be really scary. Right? Because we think it's going to consume us. Mm-hmm. And I actually think when we start doing that of like, I shouldn't be doing this, or trying to control it, trying to stop it, trying to like fix the grief, that's when the grief like lingers and lingers and lingers. So that Sobonfu talks about like the reason why we have such a problem with addiction is because people aren't feeling their grief. Yeah. She talks about the tie between grief and addiction a lot. And so when you actually move into and through your grief, what you find on the other side isn't more grief. You find joy.
Yeah.
You find this
ecstatic bliss.
Ecstatic expression of joy. It is the most wild experience ever.
It is an alchemical process. I've like directly experienced that this week by allowing myself to just fully go into it and then coming out the other side. Like oh my gosh. It looked like so many different things, but I remember like there was one day specifically where I was just like I'll speak to two different experiences. One day I was like feeling fine in the morning, went out, lived my life, and then like just, started to feel feelings come up and through. And I was able to go home in between clients in the middle of the day. And I hadn't done my Kundalini practice yet. And so like I sat down to do it. And like while I'm doing it, I'm just like feeling these things and I'm like crying. And so I'm not fully doing the breathing and all of this, but I'm like, I'm staying in it. I'm staying with it because I'm feeling it shift and move. And there was a moment that came where I was like, I'm hungry. Like I haven't eaten all day. Like I'm just going to forget this practice. Like I'm crying. I'm not even like fully in it. Like, but there was something that like kept me in it. And by the time I got to the other side of it, it like everything had totally shifted, which was so incredibly beautiful. And then there was another experience where I was actually here. There was a day and the morning I was feeling like I wasn't feeling great, but I was like, okay, I'm like going to show up. And I had some clients and I was already feeling like, I was like, maybe I'll cancel. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, a lot of times I don't like to fully show up into the healing space if I know that I can't, I know that I'm not going to be my best because I want to show up as my best always. And sometimes it's just not possible. So I do cancel. But there was something that was like, no, you need to be there. And so I came here and I saw a few people back to back. And the whole time that everyone was here and on the table during their sessions, it's like I was experiencing my crazy like anxious attachment wounding and all this other grief of all this stuff come up and through, and all I wanted to do was just like lean into it and like react and all of this. And like I almost canceled on like one person that was supposed to come in like 20 minutes because I was like, no, I need to lean into this reaction. But then like observing myself, like being like, no, like you've done that pattern before. Do not do that again. Like stay with this, be in it, and like use this space and use like what spirit is telling you to show up in service as a transmutation of that. And by the time I was done with my clients at the end of the day, like I felt so much better. And I did call on support and I did go sauna with Jill later in the evening, which was amazing. And so I got to talk about what I was experiencing but like letting myself go through that process, but then come out on the other side, like not even just feeling better, but actually feeling this ecstatic bliss and joy by just like going into it instead of suppressing it. Like in the past, I would have done those things of like, getting in bed and being a bed troll and Netflix and smoking weed and all of this. And like, I couldn't, when this situation came into my world, it's like, I can't even conceive of doing those old patterns again. Like, I know that what I need to do is to just be really present with this as it is, but also continue to show up for my life and move forward. And from that space, like bringing that joy and bliss into my life, into my relationships. And it's been profound. It's been profound.
Yeah, I love it. That's beautiful. And, and it's okay if, you have days where you can't do that.
Yeah.
And you do need to be a bed troll.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
I also think that there's spaces for that. But, it's beautiful. You had these moments of really sitting with and leaning into what was there.
Yeah.
And not distracting, not stopping, just... Yeah, that's and I think too, set and setting is important too, right? Like sometimes that stuff comes out, then we need to say, okay, this is not the same place to do that, and finding time later to come back around. But yeah, I love it. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly the opportunity, and
I've learned so much in this last week through that process. I'm like a whole new person because of it. Yeah. It's like a spiritual experience, honestly. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, it is a spiritual experience.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. And, grief is something that will always be experiencing it, and you're going to have new transitions, new situations arise that's going to be sad. You're going to be sad that the changes are happening, and so it's like the more that you can get into a practice of it, the more beautiful. Like, I think it's really, really beautiful to have a forgiveness altar, an altar where you can allow, because forgiveness, like everybody says, is more for yourself than, but really it's like having a place where you can just lay down your sadness, lay down the hurts, the grievances, the pain, right? Like you're giving your emotional energy to the altar. The altar is a container that's holding it. That's like allowing you to be with it, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that could be really helpful. And
I've never heard of that before, forgiveness altar.
yeah,
I make altars all the time, but
yeah.
that,
I mean, why not a forgiveness?
absolutely.
And, you know, and forgiveness, blue, water, you got to have those.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It's a ritual. Grief is a ritual space.
It is.
And so we all have different. There's no one way to grieve. There's no right way to grieve. But
there's no perfect time period to grieve. It takes the time it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity. It's a beautiful opportunity for presence.
Yeah.
For being in the moment. And so finding a way to move grief in a way that works for you, it's a worthy path to take. And if you want to learn more about grief and the African lineage, it's a 3-day ceremony we put on, and you learn about grief. And then we have a full day of grieving in community in a dark room with people drumming, an African beat, and with djembes, and then singing. So you have the community drumming and singing, and we have this whole big, large grief altar where people can go and grieve and be held in their grief, be seen in their grief, not like face to face.
Yeah.
But you're facing the grief altar, and then someone comes behind you and holds space while you're grieving. That's another way to learn about grief and work with grief. But there are many ways.
Yeah.
And they're all wonderful.
Yeah, I feel so called to that. I remember seeing you post about that, and I was like, yes, please. Yeah, we could all have a little bit more practice and just like understanding of what it is to hold space for that grief. But yeah, to do it in community is, especially in that way, with the drumming, with the singing, in ceremony like that, is so sacred and so special. Yeah, all about the ceremony spaces.
And as far as I know, there are other people doing this type of work, but none of them are holding true to the lineage like we are. Like, you are going to get to experience the ceremony as if Sobonfu were here.
Wow.
And so it is really unique in what we're offering. And yeah, I mean, these are tricky times. There's a lot up right now. And so even if your life is doing great, I guarantee you're dealing with nature changes, political changes. I mean, there's so much.
There's so much.
What's happening in Palestine.
Yeah, there's so much going on. There's
so
grief
much
all over the place. So it's like, by learning how to hold ourselves through that, we just get to learn how to hold each other better, which is so beautiful. Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's
you're welcome.
big conversation. I appreciate it so much. Is there anything that you feel like you'd like to leave the listeners with as we begin to close this container?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I want people to walk away with is this idea of, what if you really trusted another person's process and didn't make their process about you and your story of not enough, of shame, of whatever your story is? What if you just had that gentle compassion for yourself when someone is doing and behaving a way that's hurtful to you, and chose to not see it as they're a bad person or you're a bad person, but something's going on with them that doesn't make sense, and I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And not attaching your story to their shit show.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Oh, I adore you.
I adore you.
So much magic. We'll have to have you back and chat more sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, beautiful beings, for listening, for being here with us, for giving us your time, your presence, and your attention. We are so grateful. And I hope you go off with so much joy and bliss and beauty into your day. Thank you.